I never thought I would meet the most important person in my life while trying to save someone else's house from flooding. If someone had told me this story 10 years ago, I probably would have laughed. People usually meet in ordinary places. At work, through friends, at parties, or somewhere they go every day. My story began with a broken water pipe, a terrible storm, and a woman shouting at me from the second floor of an old house in Portland, Oregon. My name is Nathan Reed. I was 34 when this happened. I had lived in Portland for almost 10 years and worked as a building maintenance engineer. It wasn't a glamorous career, but it paid well enough, and I liked solving problems with my hands. I lived alone in a small apartment with my dog, Buddy, an old rescue I had adopted after my father died. My life was quiet, sometimes painfully quiet. I had been married once, years earlier, but the marriage ended after only 2 years. There had been no dramatic betrayal or terrible fight. We simply became different people. After the divorce, I stopped looking for love. I decided it was better to be alone than to hold on to someone who no longer wanted to stay. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, my boss called. "Nathan, are you still in the city?" "Yeah, why?" "I need you to check a property." I sighed. "I was supposed to be off today." "I know." "Then why are you calling me?" "Because a pipe burst, the first floor is flooding, and everyone else is ignoring their phones." 20 minutes later, I arrived at an old 2-story house in northeastern Portland. The rain was pouring, and water covered the street like glass. Before I could reach the front door, someone shouted from above, "Are you Nathan?" I looked up. A woman stood at a second-floor window. She wore a dark gray sweater, her hair was wet, and she looked exhausted. "Yes. Are you the plumber?" "No." She. "Then who are you?" "The guy they sent to stop the flooding." "Can you stop it?" "I can try." "Then come inside." I entered the house and immediately understood why she was panicking. Water covered the floor. Furniture had been moved against the walls, and a soaked towel lay uselessly near the stairs. After I shut off the main water supply, silence filled the house. The woman finally sat down. "My name is Claire Sullivan," she said quietly. "And before you ask, no, I'm not okay." I looked at her. "What happened?" "My father died 3 weeks ago." She glanced around the house. This was his home. I came here from Seattle to clean everything out. Suddenly, the flooding seemed like the smallest problem in the world. I should have left after finishing my work. Instead, I stayed, and that decision changed everything. The next evening, I returned to Claire's father's house. I told myself I was only going back because I needed to check the damage from the flooding. That was the professional reason, at least. The truth was less complicated and, somehow, more embarrassing. I wanted to see her again. When Claire opened the door, she looked surprised. "You actually came." I said I would. People say a lot of things. I smiled. "I'm not most people." She stared at me for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in, Mr. Reliable." That was the first time she gave me a nickname. The house looked completely different from the night before. Most of the water had been cleaned up, and several fans were running across the hallway. Boxes were everywhere. Some were labeled with simple words like books or kitchen. Others had no labels at all. "How much stuff did your father have?" I asked. Enough to make me question whether he ever threw anything away. I picked up a small wooden box. "What's this?" "Don't open it." I immediately put it down. "Now I definitely want to open it." She laughed. It was the first time I heard her laugh without sadness behind it. We spent the next hour moving boxes from the damaged rooms. Claire wanted to do everything herself, but she was terrible at lifting heavy things. At one point, she tried to carry a box that was clearly too heavy. "Put that down," I said. "I can handle it." "You almost fell." "I didn't." "You were leaning at a 45-degree angle." "That's still standing." I took the box from her. She crossed her arms. "You always this annoying?" "Only around people who refuse to admit they're wrong." "Then I should probably leave." "Probably," she smiled. For some reason, that small argument felt more natural than any conversation I'd had with someone in years. Later that evening, we discovered an old collection of photographs in the attic. Claire sat on the floor, carefully looking through them. I noticed one photograph that made her stop. It showed her father standing beside a woman I'd never seen before. "That's her," Claire whispered. "Who?" "The woman from the photograph I told you about." She turned the picture over. There was a date written on the back. 1998. Underneath it was a name. Mara. Claire stared at it. "Do you know who she is?" "No, maybe you should find out." She looked at me. "Why?" "Because your father kept this photograph for almost 30 years. Her expression changed. For the first time, I saw something other than grief in her eyes. Curiosity. That night, before I left, Claire asked me something unexpected. "Nathan, would you help me clean out this house?" I looked at the boxes surrounding us. "You're asking me to spend my free time going through a dead man's belongings?" "Yes, that's a terrible offer." "I know." I smiled. "Then why am I already saying yes?" Claire looked at me. Neither of us spoke, and in that quiet moment, something between us began. Neither of us knew what to call it yet, but I think we both felt it. For the next 2 weeks, I became an unexpected part of Claire's life. Every evening after work, I drove to her father's house. Sometimes we spent hours sorting through boxes. Other times, we barely accomplished anything because Claire would find something interesting and suddenly forget what we were supposed to be doing. One afternoon, she discovered an old cassette player. "Look at this," she said. "That's ancient." She gave me an offended look. "Don't call it ancient. Nostalgic then." "Better." We found a box of cassette tapes beside it. Claire picked one up and read the handwritten label. "Summer of '99. She looked at me. "Should we listen?" "Absolutely not." She smiled. "You're curious." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." She put the tape into the player. A few seconds later, music filled the room. Then we heard Claire's father's voice. Young, happy, completely different from the man she remembered during his final years. Claire froze. I watched her face change. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then her father's voice came through the speakers again. "Claire, if you're listening to this someday, it means you're probably cleaning this place out. Don't throw everything away." Claire suddenly laughed. "Even dead, he's still telling me what to do." I smiled. But then the recording continued. Her father's voice became quieter. "There are things I never told you. Not because I didn't love you. I was afraid." Claire stopped smiling. The tape ended. We stared at the player. "What does that mean?" she asked. "I don't know." She looked at me. "Do you think he knew he was dying?" "Maybe." She shook her head. "My father never talked about death. People don't always tell us what they're thinking." She looked down. "That's the problem." I knew she wasn't talking about the tape anymore. That evening, we didn't work. Instead, we drove to a small restaurant near the river. It wasn't a date. At least, that's what I told myself. We sat across from each other, eating burgers and pretending not to notice how comfortable everything felt. Claire asked about my family. I told her about my father, my childhood, and my failed marriage. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You talk about your divorce like it didn't hurt." "It did." "Then why do you sound like it didn't?" I looked at her. "Because eventually you get tired of being angry." She nodded. "I understand that." I wanted to ask about the mysterious woman in the photograph, but I didn't. Instead, I asked her why she had moved to Seattle. She hesitated. "Because I needed to disappear." "From what?" She looked out the window. "My life." I didn't push her. For the first time, I realized Claire had secrets. Not the dramatic kind people hide in movies. The real kind. The kind connected to regret, fear, and things that were too painful to explain. When we left the restaurant, it was raining again. We stood beside my truck. Claire looked at me. "Do you ever think people meet for a reason?" I smiled. "I used to think that was nonsense." "And now?" I looked at her. "Now I'm not so sure." She stepped closer. For one brief second, I thought she might kiss me, but she stopped. "Good night, Claire." I watched her walk away. That night, I realized something that scared me. I was beginning to fall in love with her, and I had absolutely no idea where that feeling would take us. 3 days later, Claire told me she had to return to Seattle. She said it casually, almost like it wasn't important. "I'll be leaving Friday morning." I was standing in her father's kitchen, holding a box of old dishes. "For how long?" She looked at me. I don't know. I put the box down. You didn't mention that. I didn't know when I would leave. That answer bothered me more than it should have. For the next 2 days, I tried to act normal. I went to work, answered calls, repaired broken equipment, and pretended I wasn't counting the hours until Claire left. On Thursday evening, we sat on the porch of her father's house. The rain had finally stopped. Portland looked different after a storm. The streets were wet, the trees were shining, and everything smelled clean. Claire was holding 2 cups of coffee. I don't want to go, she said. I looked at her. Then don't, she smiled sadly. It's not that simple, it never is. She looked down at her coffee. I have a life in Seattle. You have a life here too. She stared at me. I immediately realized what I'd said. I mean, I know what you mean. Silence followed. Then Claire asked, what happens when I leave? I didn't know how to answer. We keep talking? Is that what you want? I looked at her. Yes. She smiled. Good. The next morning, I drove her to the train station. She had decided to take the train instead of flying because she wanted to see the coastline. Before she left, she hugged me. It wasn't a romantic hug. At least, it wasn't supposed to be, but when she pulled away, neither of us moved. You'll call me? She asked. Yes. Promise? I promise. The train left at 9:15. I watched it disappear, then I drove home feeling like someone had taken something from me. That evening, Claire called. We talked for almost 3 hours. The next day, she called again. Then I called her. Soon, our conversations became part of my routine. I learned small things about her. She hated waking up early. She loved old bookstores. She couldn't sleep during thunderstorms. She always ordered vanilla ice cream, even in winter. And whenever she was nervous, she played with the ring on her right hand. She learned things about me too. She knew Buddy hated vacuum cleaners. She knew I couldn't cook anything more complicated than pasta. She knew I always checked the front door twice before going to bed. Weeks passed, then months. We saw each other whenever we could. Sometimes I drove to Seattle, sometimes she came to Portland. It wasn't easy, but somehow it worked. Until one Saturday night, everything changed. Claire called me at midnight. Her voice sounded strange. Are you awake? Yeah, what's wrong? I found something. What? There was a long silence. Then she whispered, I know who the woman in the photograph is. My heart started beating faster. Who? Claire took a shaky breath. Her name is Claire Sullivan. I frowned. Sullivan? Yes. Your last name? Yes. Another silence. Then Claire said something that I wasn't prepared to hear. She's my mother. I sat completely still. I knew Claire's mother was dead. At least, that's what she had told me. But now I realized something. Claire had never actually said when her mother died. She had only said that she was gone. And suddenly, I understood that there was a part of Claire's life she had never told me about. A part that had been waiting for the right moment to come back. And I had a feeling that moment had finally arrived. For several seconds, I didn't say anything. I was sitting the edge of my ear, trying to understand what Claire had just told me. Your mother? I finally asked. Yes. But I thought she was dead. Another silence. I never said she was dead. I closed my eyes. She was right. I had simply assumed it. Then where is she? I don't know. Her voice sounded different now.
Smaller.
Claire, what happened? I found a letter. What kind of letter? From my father. She took a deep breath. He wrote it almost 20 years ago. It was addressed to my mother. I sat up. What did it say? I don't know everything. I haven't finished reading it. Why not? Because the first page was enough. I waited. Claire's voice began to shake. My father wrote that he was sorry. He said he had been afraid to tell me the truth. The truth about what? I don't know. Claire, I said I don't know. Her voice suddenly broke. Then she started crying. I didn't know what to do. We had been together for months, but this was the first time I had heard her cry. I'm sorry, she whispered. You don't have to apologize. I don't want you to see me like this. Like what? Weak. I stood up and walked to the window. Claire, you're not weak. You don't know that. Maybe I don't, but I know you're human. She didn't answer. I stayed on the phone with her until she stopped crying. The next morning, I drove to Seattle. I didn't tell her I was coming. When I arrived, she opened the door and stared at me. What are you doing here? She looked at my hands. I was holding a paper bag. What's that? Breakfast. Breakfast? She blinked. Breakfast? Yes. Nathan, you drove 3 hours to bring me breakfast? Technically 3 hours and 20 minutes. She stared at me, then she smiled. It was the saddest smile I had ever seen. You are an idiot. Probably. She stepped aside. Come in. We sat at her kitchen table. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Claire brought out the letter. The paper was old and yellow. She placed it between us. I haven't read the rest. Do you want to? She nodded. I stayed beside her as she unfolded it. Her father's handwriting covered several pages. Claire read silently. Her face changed with every line. Finally, she stopped. What does it say? I asked. She looked at me. My father and my mother didn't separate because she left him. I waited. They separated because of me. What do you mean? Claire's eyes filled with tears. My mother wanted to take me with her. Why didn't she? Because my father threatened her. I couldn't speak. Claire continued. He told her that if she took me, he'd make sure she never saw me again. Why would he do that? I don't know. She looked down at the letter. But there's more. I felt a strange tension in my chest. What? Claire turned the page. According to this letter, my mother didn't leave voluntarily. I stared at her. Then what happened? She shook her head. I don't know. She looked at me with frightened eyes. And Nathan, there's something else. What? My mother may still be alive. The room became completely silent. I reached across the table and held her hand. She didn't pull away. For the first time since I'd met Claire, I understood that her grief wasn't only about losing her father. She had spent her entire life believing one story about her family. Now that story was falling apart. And I knew that whatever happened next, I couldn't simply stand outside it. I loved her. I hadn't said those words yet, not to her, not even to myself. But sitting there, holding her hand while she tried to understand the truth about her own life, I finally admitted it. I loved Claire Sullivan, and I was terrified of what that love would eventually cost me. The search for Claire's mother began with almost nothing. We had one photograph, an old letter, and a name that might not even have been real anymore. Her father had left no address, no phone number, no explanation. For the next several days, Claire searched through every box she had brought back from Portland. I helped her, even though I wasn't sure what we were looking for. One night, she found an old envelope hidden inside a book. There was no stamp, only a handwritten address. A small town on the Oregon coast. Astoria. Claire stared at it. My father lived there before Portland. Are you sure? She nodded. He told me he hated the place. Maybe that's why he left. Maybe. The following weekend we drove there together. It was a long, quiet drive. Neither of us talked much. I could feel how nervous Claire was. Every few minutes, she checked the envelope again, as if the address might disappear. When we arrived in Astoria, the weather was cold and gray. The town sat between the river and the ocean, surrounded by hills and old wooden houses. The address led us to a small blue house at the end of a narrow street. Claire stood outside for almost a minute before knocking. An elderly man opened the door. He looked at us suspiciously. Can I help you? Claire showed him the photograph. Do you know this woman? The man's expression changed immediately. He looked at Claire, then at the photograph, then back at Claire. Where did you get that? It belonged to my father. The man stepped outside and closed the door behind him. What's your father's name? Daniel Sullivan. The man went completely still. I felt Claire's hand grab my arm. You knew him? The man looked at her. Yes. How? He didn't answer immediately. Then he asked quietly, Are you his daughter? Claire nodded. The man's face became pale. Then you shouldn't be here. My stomach tightened. Why? The man looked directly at Claire. Because your father wasn't the only person who was lying to you. Claire's eyes widened. What does that mean? The man sighed. I knew your mother. Claire stopped breathing. You know where she is? No. The answer came too quickly. Claire noticed it too. You're lying. The man looked away. Listen to me. You need to go home. Where is my mother? I don't know. You just said you knew her. I knew her 20 years ago. Then tell me what happened. The man shook his head. Your father came here looking for her. Claire froze. When? About 5 years ago. My heart started beating faster. 5 years ago? Claire whispered. The man nodded. He asked me if I had heard from Mara. What did you tell him? Nothing. Why? Because I had promised her. Promised her what? The man looked at Claire that I would never tell your father where she was. Claire stepped backward. So she was alive. The man said nothing. That silence was enough. Claire covered her mouth. I reached for her hand. She was shaking. Do you know where she lives? She asked. The man closed his eyes. Yes. Claire stared at him. Where? He finally gave us an address. It was in California. A small town near the coast. Claire looked at me. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She wanted to go, immediately, but before we left, the old man stopped us. There's one thing you need to know. Claire turned around. What? He looked at her with sadness. Your mother didn't leave because she stopped loving you. Claire's face changed. Then why did she leave? The man hesitated. Because she believed staying would put you in danger. Those words followed us all the way back to Portland, and for the first time I began to wonder if Claire's father had been protecting his daughter, or protecting himself. We drove to California 3 days later. Claire barely spoke during the trip. She sat beside me, staring through the window as the Oregon coastline disappeared behind us. I wanted to hold her hand, but I didn't want to make her feel like I was trying to control what she was feeling. Finally, somewhere south of San Francisco, she broke the silence. What if she doesn't want to see me? Then we'll leave. What if she hates me? Why would she hate you? Because I remind her of him. I glanced at her. Claire, you're not your father. She looked down. You don't know that. I know enough. She turned toward me. How? I thought about it. Because I've watched you spend months cleaning out a house belonging to a man who hurt you. And you still kept his photographs. She didn't answer. We continued driving. The address belonged to a small house near the ocean in a quiet town. There were flowers in the front yard and a white wooden fence. Claire stopped in front of the gate. I can't do this. I turned off the engine. You don't have to. I came all this way. That doesn't mean you have to knock. She looked at me. What if she's really there? Then you finally get an answer. Claire stared at the house. Then she opened the door. I followed her to the front porch. She knocked. Nothing happened. She knocked again. Still nothing. Claire's face began to change. Maybe she's not here. Then we heard footsteps. The door opened. A woman stood in front of us. She was older than Claire had imagined. Her hair was almost completely gray, but her eyes were unmistakable. Claire took one step backward. The woman looked at her. Neither of them spoke. Then the woman whispered, Claire? Claire's entire body froze. She had imagined this moment for years, but nothing could have prepared her for it. Mom? The woman covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. Claire looked at me. I could see fear on her face. Then she turned back. Her mother stepped forward, and Claire collapsed into her arms. I stood on the porch, watching them. I had never seen two people hold each other like that. It wasn't a simple reunion. It was 20 years of questions, anger, grief, and love finally breaking through at once. After several minutes, Claire pulled away. Why did you leave me? Her mother closed her eyes. I didn't. Then why wasn't I with you? Because your father made sure I couldn't take you. You should have fought harder. I did. Not hard enough. Her mother's face broke. Claire stepped back. Of him? Yes. Why? Her mother looked at me, then back at Claire. Because your father wasn't the man you thought he was. Claire shook her head. I know he lied. No. Her mother's voice became quiet. You don't know the worst part. I felt a cold feeling in my stomach. What worst part? Toward the ocean. Your father didn't just threaten me. She paused. He followed me. Claire's expression changed. What are you saying? He found me once. When? 5 years ago. Claire immediately looked at me. The same year her father had supposedly searched for her mother. Her mother continued. He told me that if I ever contacted you, he would make sure you lost everything. Why? Her mother looked directly at her daughter. Because he knew you were going to inherit something. Claire frowned. What? Her mother didn't answer. Instead, she looked at me. And for the first time, I understood that this wasn't just a family secret. There was something else, something much bigger. Claire's mother whispered, "Your father left you the house for a reason." "What reason?" Her mother shook her head. "Because the house contains proof." "Proof of what?" She looked terrified. "Proof that your father wasn't the man everyone believed he was." Claire stared at her. Then her mother said something that changed everything. "Someone else has been looking for that proof." I felt Claire's hand find mine. "Who?" I asked. Her mother looked toward the road. "I don't know." Then she whispered, "But I think they know about you now." We stayed in California for 2 days. Claire wanted answers, but her mother, Mara, couldn't give her all of them. She knew pieces of the story, but not everything. The more we talked, the more complicated the past became. According to Mara, Claire's father had been involved in a business partnership in the late 1990s. The company had eventually collapsed, leaving several people financially ruined. Daniel had blamed Mara for everything, even though she had never been involved in the company's decisions. Then something happened. A large amount of money disappeared. Nobody knew where it went. Daniel claimed Mara had stolen it. Mara insisted Daniel had hidden it. The argument destroyed their marriage. But the money was never found. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Claire asked. Mara looked at her. "Because I wanted you to have a normal life." Claire laughed bitterly. "Normal? I know how that sounds. You disappeared for 20 years. I stayed away because I believed it was the only way to protect you." Claire looked at me. I could see she was struggling between anger and forgiveness. That evening, Mara gave Claire an old key. "Your father kept this." Claire stared at it. "What does it open?" "I don't know." "Then why give it to me?" "Because he left it with me 5 years ago." Claire's eyes widened. "He came here?" Mara nodded. "He told me that if anything happened to him, I was supposed to give you this." I looked at the key. There was a small metal tag attached to it. On the tag was a number, 217. We returned to Portland the following morning. The drive home felt different. We had started the trip looking for Claire's mother. Now we were carrying a key that might explain everything. When we reached her father's house, Claire immediately began searching. 217, she repeated. "There aren't that many rooms. Maybe it's not a room." We searched the basement. Nothing. The attic. Nothing. The garage. Nothing. Finally, Claire noticed something behind an old wooden cabinet. There was a narrow door. I had never seen it before. "That's strange," I said. Claire moved the cabinet. The door was locked. She looked at the key. My heart began beating faster. "Do you want me to open it?" She nodded. The key fit. The door opened with a loud crack. Behind it was a small storage room. There were no windows, no furniture, only several boxes. Claire stepped inside. The first box contained financial documents. The second contained photographs. The third contained newspaper articles. I picked up one of them. The headline was dated 1999. "Local businessman accused of fraud." The man's name was Daniel Sullivan. Claire took the newspaper from my hand. Her face went pale. My father was accused of fraud? Apparently. Why didn't I know this? I didn't have an answer. She opened another box. Inside was a folder with her name written on it. Claire stopped breathing. "Nathan." I looked at her. She opened the folder. Inside were photographs of her. Dozens of them. Claire at school. Claire leaving work. Claire walking through Seattle. Some photographs were only a few years old. "This can't be happening," she whispered. I took a step closer. "Someone was watching you." Claire turned another page. There was one final photograph. It showed Claire standing outside her apartment. The date was only 3 months earlier. I looked at her. "Who took these?" She shook her head. "I don't know." Then I noticed something in the corner of the photograph. A car. Black, parked across the street. The same car appeared in another photograph. And another. Claire suddenly grabbed my arm. "Nathan." "What?" She pointed toward the window. A black car was parked across the street. I felt my stomach drop. It was the same car. Someone had followed us home, and now they knew exactly where we were. We didn't stay in the house that night. I grabbed the folder. Claire took the key, and we left through the back door. We drove to my apartment because I didn't know where else to go. Buddy greeted us at the door as if nothing had happened. Claire dropped onto the couch. I don't understand. Neither do I. Someone has been following me. Maybe. She looked at me. Maybe. I sat beside her. We don't know who the person is. We know someone is watching me. Yes. She stared at the folder. Why? I didn't answer. That was the question that frightened me most. The next morning, I called a friend who worked in private security. I showed him the photographs and explained everything. He examined the pictures carefully. This isn't random. What do you mean? Claire asked. Someone has been documenting your movements. Why? That's impossible to know. He pointed to one photograph. This one was taken recently. How recently? 3 months ago. Claire looked at me. That's when I started cleaning out my father's house. My friend nodded. Then whoever took these pictures may have known about the house. The thought made my blood run cold. Do you think they followed me too? I asked. He looked at me. Possibly. Claire immediately stood up. You need to leave. I stared at her. What? If they're watching me, they might be watching you because of me. Claire, I'm serious. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. She shook her head. No, you don't. Then she walked toward the door. Where are you going? Back to Seattle. Why? Because this is my problem. I stood up. No. She stopped. I walked toward her. That's not how this works. How what works? Use. The word came out before I could stop it. Claire looked at me. I realized I had finally said it. Us. Something existed between us. Something neither of us had been brave enough to name. I love you, I said. Her eyes filled with tears. I continued. I don't care who is watching you. I don't care what your father did. I don't care how complicated your family is. I love you. Claire covered her mouth. Then she started crying. I stepped closer. I should have told you sooner. She shook her head. No, you can't say that. Why? Because I love you too. I stared at her. For a moment, the entire world became silent. Then she kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. There was no music or perfect sunset. It was just two scared people standing in my apartment holding each other because neither of us knew what tomorrow would bring. But the next morning, Claire was gone. I woke up at 7. Her side of the bed was empty. At first, I thought she had gone to get coffee. Then I saw the note. Nathan, I'm sorry. I can't let you get hurt because of me. Don't look for me, please. I read it 3 times. Then I called her. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I called her mother. No answer. I drove to her father's house. The black car was gone. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything had been searched. Boxes were overturned. The folder was missing. But one thing remained. The key. I picked it up. Then I noticed a small piece of paper beneath it. There were only 4 words written on it. Ask your father. I froze. My father? I didn't understand. Then I remembered something. My father had worked in Portland construction for almost 30 years, and he had known Daniel Sullivan. Suddenly, I realized the truth. Claire hadn't disappeared because she was afraid of losing me. She had disappeared because she had discovered something about our families. And whatever she had found, it was powerful enough to make her believe she had to leave me to protect me. I had spent years believing my father's death was the end of my family's secrets. I was wrong. It was only the beginning. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly afraid of losing someone. Not because they had died, because they had chosen to disappear. I spent the next 3 days trying to find Claire. I called every person I knew. I searched through old documents belonging to my father and found nothing useful. Then, on the 4th night, I discovered an old photograph hidden inside one of his boxes. It showed my father standing beside Daniel Sullivan. I stared at it for a long time. On the back was an address. The same address from the old letter. I drove there immediately. The house was empty, but someone had been there recently. On the kitchen table was an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter from Claire. Nathan, if you're reading this, then you found the truth. My father and yours knew each other. They were business partners. The money that disappeared in 1999 wasn't stolen by my mother. It was hidden by our fathers. They created a secret account and used it to cover up illegal business deals. When everything started falling apart, my father blamed my mother. Your father helped him hide the evidence. That's why they knew each other. That's why my mother was forced to disappear. And that's why my father kept watching me. I found proof that both of them were involved. I also found something else. Your father wasn't just helping mine. He was trying to expose him. That's why he disappeared from the business. That's why Daniel hated him. And that's why Daniel never told you anything. Nathan, I'm sorry. I love you. But if I stay, they will use you to get to me. I'm going to California. Don't follow me. I finished reading the letter with tears in my eyes. For the first time, everything made sense. My father hadn't abandoned his old business because it had failed. He had walked away because he had discovered the truth, and Claire had disappeared because she believed history was repeating itself. But I knew something she didn't. Running had never saved anyone. So I went to California. I found Claire 3 days later. She was standing on a beach near her mother's house. When she saw me, she didn't move. You shouldn't have come. I know. Then why are you here? Because you asked me not to come. She almost smiled. I walked closer. I spent most of my life believing love meant find someone who made your life easier. Claire looked at me. I was wrong. I took her hand. Love means choosing someone even when their life is complicated. She started crying. I'm scared. So am I. What if something happens to you? Then we'll face it together. Claire looked toward the ocean. I don't know what happens next. Neither do I. She finally turned toward me. But I know one thing. What? I don't want to lose you. I pulled her into my arms. This time, neither of us let go. The investigation that followed lasted almost a year. The evidence Claire discovered eventually exposed the financial crimes connected to her father and several other people. My father's name was cleared, and the truth about his decision to leave the business finally became public. Claire's mother came back into her life. Not immediately, not perfectly, but slowly. And Claire and I, we stayed together. 2 years later, we returned to Portland. The old house had been sold. But Claire kept one thing from it, the wooden box she had once told me not to open. Inside was the photograph of her parents. She kept it because she had finally forgiven them. Not because they deserved it, but because she deserved to stop carrying their mistakes. As for me, I still think about that rainy afternoon when my boss called me. If he hadn't called, I would never have met Claire. If that pipe hadn't burst, I would never have entered that house. And if Claire hadn't needed help, I might have lived the rest of my life believing that being alone was easier than loving someone. People often ask me when I knew Claire was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. The truth is, I don't think there was an exact moment. Maybe it was when she laughed at my terrible jokes. Maybe it was when she trusted me with her darkest secrets. Or maybe it was the day she disappeared and I realized that loving someone sometimes means following them into the unknown. Years later, Claire and I still argue. She still hates waking up early. I still can't cook. Buddy still hates the vacuum cleaner. And sometimes, when it rains in Portland, we sit together by the window and remember the old house where everything began. Our story wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. It wasn't the kind of love story people write in fairy tales. But it was ours. And after everything we survived, I finally understood something. The right person doesn't always enter your life at the right time. Sometimes they arrive in the middle of a disaster. Sometimes they bring questions instead of answers. Sometimes they leave before you are ready. But if you're lucky, they find their way back. And when they do, you realize that the greatest love stories aren't the ones without problems. They're the ones where two people decide, again and again, that they are worth fighting for. That was my story. The story of how I met Claire Sullivan, and the story of how, in the middle of the worst storm of our lives, we somehow found our way home.